We have on Tuesday, you wanted to submit the final draft of the paper 1. Oh yeah, I know what I was going to say. Everything says 10 p.m., right? Everything says by 10 p.m., which is Eastern Standard Time, depending on where, so you know that. But the actual Blackboard, like when I set it up, it's not really due until like midnight, like 11:59 p.m. So anytime you see 10 p.m., just know that it means 11:59. I mean, this is sort of, again, the English department makes this, right? So for some reason they put 10 p.m. there. But in general, know that you have that little extra time in case that matters. All right, so we are week 4. So Tuesday, you wanted to submit your assignment 1, which I also call essay 1. And you wanted to make sure that your final draft of that you're submitting has both parts to it, right? Has your digital literacy narrative, story of you engaging in active digital literacy, and then also your analysis of that event. So you want to make sure they have both. I mean, it's an unusual essay in that, right? That it has these sort of 2 very separate parts. But in any event, that's the plan. So you want to make sure that you submit that. If you didn't, you can go back and resubmit it. I've tried to make all the assignments so that you can just submit multiple things. And I can take a look and I can see which one you submitted last and so on. So now we're trying to work on, or sort of begin working on, this next assignment. This essay 2, which is what I'm calling it, which they call assignment 2. It's not super. It's a tricky idea, I think. So the concept is kind of complex, which is why if you look on our little thing here, our little schedule, you're basically just working on the discussion prompt for this week. So you're looking at week 4's discussion prompt, which I can look at. That's basically the only thing, and you're trying to have that done by Sunday night. And then next week, week 5, we're also working on a prompt. Then I'm talking, and then you're completing your discussion prompt and B. So there's prompt A and prompt B for week 5. So notice that we're not, like, the essay is not actually even happening yet. You get to week 6. So then we're on Tuesday of week 6, we're looking at your rough draft of this essay. So it's important that we sort of take the time, to do this well, I guess. And so I was debating whether I should try to explain it tonight, but I'm thinking I can explain it tonight and then also explain it next Thursday, right? Just because that will make it clear. It's definitely a more, like I said, more complex concept than the first essay in any event. So, which is why they're giving us this extra time to deal with it. Okay. Actually, hold on, let me see. And I'm still I'm just started to grade last week's assignments. So I haven't quite gotten to the actual essays yet. I still have to do the wikis and the essays, I think. So I'll be doing that tonight and tomorrow. Okay, so week 4, I wanted to make sure people were clear about. So there's an article that we're supposed to read that's mentioned that I went to, so I found it. And it's this, and I think we need, you want to read all of it because that's why not learn. But I think most of what we need to work with is probably in the first half. What is up? Is that my internet problem? Wow. Home Remind. Okay, so that's, oh yeah, so as you can see, nothing. So there's an article to read, and then they also want you to pull a narrative from this archive, right, which is a bunch of digital literacy narratives. And so you're trying to find one, and you're sort of going to use it as a resource. And that's, they switched it up a little bit. So I think last summer they had people already look at this database. Digital Archive of Literacy Narratives. Now, what's interesting is this, the school has picked this, but it's just literacy narratives, right? So I don't know. I feel like, so you wrote, hopefully, a digital literacy narrative, right? This is just a digital archive of the literacy narratives. Like, I'm wondering if the people who sort of put this course together and sort of was like, here's what you're going to teach, I don't know, maybe thought this was about digital literacy because the word digital is in it. So what I would suggest is, you're searching narratives, you want to find one that's a solid narrative. I might try to search digital just because you may have a chance of finding one that's since that's what the subject is that we're sort of interested in. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, I worry that since it said digital and literacy narrative, someone's like, yeah, this is a good one. I don't know. All right, so that would be my suggestion, right? So now we have, and these are just people, right? These are just basically first-person accounts. It's like almost exactly what you wrote for the last essay, right? So you're trying to find one, but my suggestion or advice to you is you want to find a solid one. Like, you want to find one that's good, that's written by somebody who you understand, who's enough, who writes well enough, blah, blah, blah. As opposed, and anyway, that's my one thing. So when you're looking for you want to have that, because what you're going to do is you're going to use that as one of your sources for this upcoming essay project. Yeah. I'm sure. Well, honestly, I'm trying not to point people anywhere. I would say you want to look for digital literacy narrative. So you want to search that. And then here's what I would do, right? I'm looking at the titles and I'm looking at the little descriptions, right? And so this is you sort of figuring out which sources are better than other sources. So for example, just on the page that I'm showing you now, there's Digital Me, that's the first one. It says, this narrative specifically explores my digital literacy, describing how I evolved into the tech-reliant person I am today. Okay, that's pretty solid compared to, if we go all the way to the other side, literacy narrative. This is a project for an English class, right? So what I'm saying is, right, they're trying to get you also to start to engage in this process of deciding what's credible and what's not credible, like what's a useful source and what's not a useful source. So I'm not meant to assign any, right? I'm not meant to be like, hey, look at these. Because if I were, then they would just be like, here, give them these. So it's about you trying to find them, but I'm saying what you're trying to do is use, your critical thinking ability and decide which one's better. The one that says it's a project for an English class, perhaps it's genius and it's amazing, but I would definitely take a look at the one where the person took the time to actually articulate what it is theirs is about. So I'm meant to give you some sort of, advice, but you need to pick one that you think is good. So I hope that, I know it's not the most satisfying answer. Interesting. Anyway, so that's the digital archive. So no matter what, I would start with just throw in digital literacy. That way, at least you'll be looking for things that are related to our subject of digital literacy. All right, I think I'm done with this thing. All right, so yeah, so let's see, what do we got? Well, you know what? Actually, I might just stick with, since we do have the time, meaning let me just go to the discussion board for the week and try to talk about what you're doing via that assignment. All right, so week 4 interaction prompt is this it's sort of the core concept of what's going to turn into an eventual essay. And very broadly speaking, it's this idea where you're looking at two different things and you're trying to look at the relationship between these two things. The first thing is the process of a person reading, right? So when we all read, we're reading, it's a very internal process, right? Like it's literally in our heads, and it's very private. Like we do that completely by ourselves, and we take in information and whatever it's telling us. So that's one process. And then it's trying to get us to look at sort of the context around that process, right? And that's sort of what this article is about the social construct that's around us that affects the way we decide what something means. Okay, like so when we're reading an article, we're interpreting it in a certain way. One of the forces, or some of the forces that are shaping our interpretation, are around us, like meaning the culture around us, and the situation around us. Like those are things that interact with us. So we interpret things in certain ways. Like we don't do it just in a vacuum. This is their big idea, right? We're not like extracting pure meaning from a book and understanding it. We're understanding it in relationship to what's around us. And so that's sort of the broad idea. Yeah, I don't know if that helps us as much as my little slides might help us a little bit better. So I broke down the reading, the assignment sheet for paper 2, right? So here's the idea. I'll read a little bit of it. So reading is a private individual act that happens inside our heads. So how does that privacy and individuality relate to the social ecosystem that surrounds reading? So when an individual sits down to read something, how do her individual thoughts and experiences relate to her social context? Is one more important than the other, right? So it's this idea that we have our own personal experiences, we have our own personal mental process and thinking and brain and all that, right? So we sit down and we interpret and understand some text that we're reading in a certain way. And this is the concept that, guess what? You're not just doing that all alone in a vacuum. In fact, you're doing it in relationship to other things that are outside of you. Could be, anything, school, depending on what you're reading. Like, for example, a very quick example, if I assigned everybody this essay, like everybody read this one essay, and I assign it to everybody, part of the thing that's affecting how you understand it is the fact that I've assigned it to you, right? Like, so it influences your interpretation and the meaning of it, just because that's the thing. Like, okay, he assigned it to me. So you're approaching it a certain way, you're understanding in a certain way. That's a very sort of basic example. They're trying to get us to think about even bigger effects, or bigger elements that affect us. Okay, so and then is one more important than the other, right? Like, can I just be like, dude, I don't care about social stuff. It's all my brain. It's me and my brain, and we're understanding it. Or is it like I couldn't understand it at all without having the social construct stuff around me? All right, so the paper will eventually be this idea that you're going to write an essay it's going to be a little bit of an argument essay, meaning you're going to have a perspective on this question. The perspective being you're going to make a decision or draw a conclusion about this relationship between the individual reading and understanding and the social construct ecosystem around them, right? So, for example, a person could theoretically argue, yeah, the social ecosystem doesn't matter at all. Individuals decide what things mean, and that's it. And you'd have to then go ahead and prove that using these sources that they're giving us. More likely, or probably a more complex or better answer, would be how the social ecosystem affects the way you understand something. Okay, so you're using ideas from the Mary Hamilton article that failed to load a moment ago. You're using examples from at least one, it says at least, right, from the Digital Archive of Literacy Narratives. And then for these other assigned readings, like how to read a scientific paper and how to seriously read a scientific paper. As far as the actual assignment goes, it's basically for week 4, for the discussion board, you're picking one of those narratives and you're trying to use that and break it down and notice elements in the essay that are influential to the person. So does the person mention schools as an influence to them? Do they any other institutions? Like, what are they talking about? What are the things, the institutions that might be that they're talking about that might influence them? So you're trying to find mentions of things. That's the basic thing. Yeah, but it's not a super complete analysis. You're basically trying to break it down, and you're trying to the thing that I just said about the individual reading and writing and the way that social constructs affect people, you're trying to decode somebody else's and see where that's happening to them. So you found your article from the archive, and you take it and you're looking at it and you're reading it and you're trying to decide, okay, so this is about, maybe somebody's talking about politics and the government and so on. So that's one of the forces that's sort of helping them, or whatever. It's shaping the way they understand something. So you're trying to look at what are the main forces in somebody's writing, right? So it's like you're reading it a little bit differently. So you're not just reading it to be like, all right, what do they say? You're reading it and you're sort of decoding it to be like, okay, so what are the things in it, that are affecting this person? What are the institutions? Like, what are the big deal things that are going on in there that are sort of influencing this person? So yes. So the answer to your question is yes. You are for week 4 for the discussion prompt. You're picking a narrative, and then you're analyzing it. You're breaking it down. You're looking for mentions of these things. You're trying to explain. So, and this says, well, I'll read it. Explain how these examples relate. All right. So explain how this example, because you're going to pick one narrative, relates to the ideas that we're looking at this week. So this means what I just talked about. The ideas that we're looking at this week are the ideas that we read something and we understand it, we interpret it, and we understand the meaning of it, but we don't do that just in some sort of vacuum. Since we're human beings living in a world, we're doing that in relationship to things that are other forces that are Well, you point that out. That's a big part of it, right? You point out that schools, okay, the influence of school and the importance of school and him wanting to succeed in school. Like you're just sort of you want to name the things, like the main institutions that are influencing him. Exactly. So you say, okay, I went to school and learned digital literacy and so on. So you're like, all right, so school's a major influencer here, right? That's one of the things you point out. So you're basically identifying that. So I don't know that you're really developing much about that at the moment, but you're definitely identifying that. And then you can talk about this. When it says, you're trying to relate it to the ideas. So how does this person's understanding of school or of the importance of school affect what they're writing? Like, how does it influence what they're writing? Like, okay, so they talk about it. So clearly, school's very important to this person. Like, they clearly think of school as some sort of important thing that they want to succeed at. That's how they're presenting it in this particular narrative, right? So that's an influence. Someone else might be talking about the government, and they hate the government and they're sick of the government, and so that's shaping the way that they're understanding their own situation or whatever. So the goal is you're identifying these main players or these main institutions, and then you're trying to, as far as talking about them, you're trying to discuss how they might influence this person and what they're saying. Okay, so it's almost like, trying to think. Yeah, go ahead. But almost, because you want to take it one step further and you want to explain this is your own idea, how this is influencing what they're saying. Okay, so for example, if I'm a person who really believes that school's the most important thing, and what I want to do is succeed at school no matter what, and then I write this little essay thing, and you read it and you go, okay, so clearly school's a major influence in this person's life, and so probably this person is being influenced by school because they really want to succeed at school, and so they're sort of talking about subjects and so on and whatever, their experience in relationship to this idea that they need to succeed at school, right? So you're identifying it like you just said, but then you're also trying to, if you can, based on what, whichever one you've chosen, you're trying to sort of comment on how that, whatever the institution is, might be influencing this person's writing, right? So this person, for example, if I'm a person who hates school, I think school's a waste of time and nobody should ever do it, and then I write this essay, and if someone reads it, they could be like, okay, so this guy is being influenced by his very, very negative view of school and how it's like a trap and it does terrible things and so on. So you're trying to identify the things, but you're also trying to figure out how they might be influencing the person, right? How they might be affecting them. That's the only other thing I would add to your description. So, okay, so sort of, I'm trying to think of how to make that. This is sort of the part, you're using this as an example to do that, exactly the thing that you said. And then from that, eventually, like not with the same piece of writing, you're able to sort of figure out your own reading, right? Like the way that people read things and how we're influenced by this. Okay, so let me try to be clear as I can. So this exercise is about pointing out, reading somebody else's writing, pointing out the institutions and what influences them, because that's fairly clear and straightforward. It's harder to be like, all right, so what's influencing you, right? Like we're like, I don't know, I just wrote this essay, but that's where we're headed. So we're sort of headed in the direction of that. But first, to get there, the theory is, if we can look at someone else's writing and we can identify these forces that sort of impact their writing, then when we turn our attention to ourselves, we have a better shot of identifying things that are influencing our writing. Yes, except for you're sort of going with the premise that there is no such thing as their own, right? Meaning like everything's been influenced by something. And so you're trying to just decode that and figure out what it is. Right? Because I mean, that's part of the point of this exercise is it's like we don't really generate thoughts out of nowhere. Right? We don't really generate ideas out of nowhere. We don't really have experiences with meaning out of nowhere, meaning that there's always these elements in society that are influencing what we understand, what we think, and so on. Yeah, this is why I think they gave us, 2 weeks to do this. I don't know. I hope sounds like I'm being a little bit clear, but you never know. Like I said, it's way easier, right, to read someone else's thing and decide what's going on there than it is to sort of think about yourself and what's in and how, what you're saying and so on. So anyway, that's the idea. I don't know, Tammy, does that help? The idea that you're looking at it, analyzing it, so that shortly, right, in the very near future, you're sort of turning that lens on yourself. Yeah, it's super complex. Like, I mean, So I'm not. What? No, but that's what I mean. All you have, but that's why I like the idea of decoding, right? So you're reading what people are writing, and you're sort of using that like it's a code, right? So this person refers to school, and they use a certain language, and so clearly they hate school. So the hatred of institution of school is influencing what they're writing, right? So it's about being like practicing identifying these forces that are influencing people and their ideas and their writing. And then if we can do that to someone else, the theory goes, right, we can turn it on ourselves so that when our own reading rather, even, we can be like, oh, I'm reading this in a certain way because of some influence, right? Like I'm understanding this book or this passage in a certain way, because of whatever my particular set of circumstances in the social ecosystem, blah blah blah. But so I think that's the move here. The idea is we're doing this to somebody else. We're trying to be like, okay, when they talk about how the government always screws its people, okay, clearly then the government is influencing this person's writing in this negative way because they use a certain sort of language. So that's something we need to pay attention to. And this is it's a broader critical thinking process because what they're trying to make sure people can do, this course is trying to make help people do, is that when we take in information, we're also super aware of other things that are influencing the information, right? Especially these days. So we're not like, well, that must be true because someone said it out loud on the internet, right? Like that's just not anything that's possible anymore, right? So what the theory is that our new sort of critical thinking skills have to involve understanding what forces are sort of shaping people's writing and what forces are shaping the way we read. I mean, it's a super concept thing. I love it because I love abstract concepts, actually, right? Because I know, but students don't, which is fair because I don't know. So the very basics. Week 4 interaction prompt. You find a good article from the Digital Literacy Place, hopefully. You're reading it and you're looking for mentions of these forces that I keep talking about, right? Institutions, schools, hospitals, banks, clubs, churches, economic forces, jobs and salaries and insurance and prices and retirement. You keep going. Politics and government, voting and taxes and public education and private education, you could add. Cultural forces, like what's something's ideas about what gender is, about what appropriate things are, what about beautiful is, what about all that stuff. So you're trying to pull out these or you're trying to identify forces that are basically shaping what this person is talking about, or they're influencing what they're writing about. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, in the discussion post? Well, actually, I think always it's good to practice. If you can actually find a quote from them, that's always the best because it helps you support. So if I said, this person is clearly being influenced by the fact that the hospital did not treat her mother very well, and then I could throw up a quote where she says something that proves that. So and this is just for the post. I mean, so it's not super official, right? I mean, because it's a post. But I would say the practice that we're trying to get into is finding quotes from the text that will help us prove something, and then making sure that we cite who that is. And so all you really need for that is, I would say, if you can, pull quotes, and then you actually only really need their name. That's actually the only citation that you need, because we're doing MLA citation. And you're supposed to do, for MLA, you need last name and page number. But it's very weird. Page number is very odd in the internet world since, there are no pages. So basically, it's just you want to make sure you mention the name of the person who you're talking about. But again, I would say yes. You definitely want to. And then, okay, so I would say just take this step by. You have 3 questions here. You have 3 parts to this interaction prompt. So one is you find the article, you look for these mentions of these different forces that shape things. So maybe you put quotes that show that. That's fine. Then you're trying to explain how the examples that you've pointed to deal with what we're talking about this week, which is how exterior things influence the way we write and the way we read. And it's asking you to think about it, right? It's trying to be like, does it even matter, really? I mean, is it worth it to think about all this? Or are we all really just individually being geniuses without being affected by anything? The answer is no. But anyway, so that's what 2 is. You're sort of explaining it. And then 3 is you need to go and comment, like this is regular. You comment on 2 people's posts. And we're trying to get people to go beyond, but you guys are being pretty good about this actually, but especially the people who are listening to me right now. Meaning you're not just being like, good, that's neat. Go, I agree or whatever. So you're doing that pretty well. But 3 here is just giving templates, right? Which help us direct our thinking. So if you are having trouble, right? If you're just tempted to be like, hey, that's a good post, and you're like, I know that's not enough, take a look at the templates and see if you can. I mean, because they automatically, it's what's good about them. They automatically direct your thinking. And so you might be able to say, okay, when you use the word blank, it made me think of blank. Did you mean that, or did you mean something else like blank or whatever, right? So you can use those to help you, but that's it. So 3 things. Yeah, so number 1 is actually you just have to have 2 examples. So basically it's finding quotes or whatever, 2 examples of evidence of the person being influenced by something, like an institution, economics, politics, cultural forces, anything. Number 2, explain how those things connect with this idea that exterior forces alter or influence the way we write and the way we read. So that's sort of a free writing thing where you're just generating ideas. So you should feel free to just write whatever, right? And because this is like very much like brainstorming rough draft idea. Just write stuff, right? That's the key. If you generate a bunch of content and some of it makes no sense, that's perfectly fine. That's the style I believe in. So that's what that is. You just trying to be like, I don't know, I guess the person hates school, or maybe the fact that they hate school has made them think about it this way, blah, blah, and this, do whatever So that's not, it's about you and your interpretation. And then commenting on two of your classmates and saying something interesting, basically, as opposed to like, you know, I agree with what you're saying. Challenge people, right? I can see that you are saying blank, but when I read blank, it made me wonder whether blank, whatever. So these are just some suggestions. Anyway, that's the idea for this week. What do we think? It's kind of cool, right? I mean, it's kind of cool, but it's also like not super easy. I understand that, I think. Can't believe I didn't even use my super awesome thing. Which means I'll have to use it before. Yeah, we might talk about that a little bit more, because this PowerPoint that I put together is sort of about actually shaping ideas, organizing ideas into an essay form, right? And right now, excuse me, this week is really just about getting familiar with this idea, right? You know, becoming more familiar with this concept of exterior forces, reading, writing, the relationship between those, and so on. So we do that this week. Next week is really about like, okay, now we're going to try to make this into an essay, which is when I think a lot of this, like my PowerPoint thing, will make more sense. Yeah, I'm not going to go through it now. So I have it then, at least. Good for me. Because I think that was better. A better way to do that was just to talk about the discussion post, I think. All right, what do you guys got? Got questions? Yeah, go for it. Hold on. Let's look at my handy dandy thing. Which might be wrong. I don't think it is, but I'm going to wait to say that for a minute. Actually, I'm just going to go to the home page to make sure. All right, because right, it should be the following week, is what I'm thinking. See, you can't see the secret. But I made that schedule. I made that calendar. Yeah, no, for sure. Nope, it's not going to be next Tuesday, so it's going to be the week after. So that's why. So what they want, I mean, they're doing this on purpose in the sense that, right, we're spending, this week really just figuring out this idea, because it's kind of, right, they're asking you to make these connections, which are not super easy connections to make, but become more familiar with the concept of it. Next week, we start to like focus in on how we can, what we would say if we had to make an argument about this. And then we turn it into, week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6. Yeah, so the rough draft is not due till next June 23rd. So they're trying to give us time. Because I don't know, I agree. It's an interesting, again, it's trying to do all of these things, right? We're practicing the critical thinking thing, where we break something down, and then we're also practicing the creative thinking thing, where we connect things together, which is, the whole point of the course as far as I'm concerned. But developing thinking. What else? Anything else? You've got, let me see, I don't really have a lot of talking though, huh? Yeah. I know. It's super. Wait, is the one that I posted 50 pages? Okay, so let's look at that then, because it's a good point. Yeah, right, because I found it and was like, okay, so here it is. I believe it's the beginning part of it, but let's make sure we know what that is. Let's see. Hover load. Yeah, it's not the entire thing. I know that for sure. I just had that and was like, okay, I'll put that so at least there's something. But they don't really give a lot of good clues as to what they mean by just that passage, since it's like a bunch of passages. Come on, you can do it, computer. It's like my old Apple IIe trying to load my game right now. It's exciting. Come on, guys. Unbelievable. For the draft, so the final draft is like 4 to 5. So you basically want as much as you can have for the draft, for the first draft. I usually say 3 or so. 3 to 4 is good. So exactly. So we're not, you don't have to find any other sources. You're using, that's why it would be good to get a good digital narrative from that archive, like since that's going to be one of your sources. Like I would get one that's worthy. And then, right, it's basically those 2 scientific paper things, and then it's also this thing, right? I think, I almost think it's up to this part that's literacy as situated social practice, which is like it's like the first 3 pages. Right, because it moves on to other stuff that's pretty. See, this is not it. Yeah, I think we're done by now. First of all, it's only 21 pages. Mrs. 50 pages. No, you mean it felt like 50 because I could see that. That's absolutely true. Like it's like 100,000. No, okay. Yeah, no, I say it looks like really I would go up. It's the first 3 pages. I might replace it too for the links for people. I know you probably already. It's up to ways of understanding literacy. Let me see if that one has anything useful in it. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah. So I'm saying that the thing that really matters, like you said, it's actually just an explanation of it. And I think that's the introduction. Might just be the introduction. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. Which is actually first purpose of literacy. Yeah, that might be useful because we're trying to talk about society. All right, so I'm going to say all the way up to that, to literacy as situated social practice, even though that's. It's supposed to be, but I don't know that we get that far into it. Let me see how far it goes. Yeah, that's okay. So exploring broader context. Documenting literacy might be where we stop. Choose a domain. Ugh. Why wouldn't they just say it? Like how much it is? Okay, definitely how literacy is changing is the beginning of where we don't have to do. Toxic literacy. Yeah, all right. So to be safe, I think we do it here. So it's page 12 on this world. It begins with 7. So 7 to 12 is what we're looking at. Yeah. Yeah, 7 to 12. No, great. Thank you for asking. That was good. What's up? Which post? Well, that's them explaining what I just explained. They're trying to. I think that's the textbook version of trying to explain this concept of the social ecosystem. That's what that's about. So it's the same idea that I'm talking about, but it's in a book, it's official. But I'm gonna cut it off. So I think it's like it's the first 5 pages of it are what are important. So you want to have that also because you want to use that as a source for when you're writing eventually the essay, right? Because this is like one of our research sources. So whenever you refer to whatever, if you talk about the social ecosystem or whatever, you want to be able to have a source to back you up, and that's what this is. But it's basically the first 5 pages of what I posted that we need to pay attention to. So I'm probably going to fix that. So everywhere I put it, I'm going to go ahead and put the Eriki. There we go. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and change it. So yeah, it's basically your research backing source for this concept of all the things that I just talked about. Right. So far you just have me explaining this idea. Now there's this actual, and it does some good jobs of defining other associated terms that you may actually want to use, like this social practice concept, which I haven't talked about, but which describes some of the things I was talking about. So I'm going to break it up. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, so I'll break this into what it needs to be, and then repost it if people aren't like. Yeah, so I'll go through and post that. So it's basically those first 5 pages. So we have that. The other things are how to read a scientific paper. The thing about the scientific paper thing is it's trying to be an example of how exterior forces influence the way we read or write or read, right? So we can talk more about that next time. But that's why those are there. They're basically there, like, one does it seriously, and then the other one sort of is commenting on that. But it's supposed to be this example of here's somebody who wrote this thing, and notice the forces that are influencing the writing and the reading of a scientific paper. So it's supposed to serve as an example. Seriously, what is going today. Yeah, so that's about it. Yeah, Carlos, yeah, you might not have been here. I mentioned this. So always think at 11:59 because that's what it's. I know one thing, like that's the thing that the school made. Like they tried to make it, and I didn't go through and change it because I didn't. And so now, yeah, so it says 10 p.m., but the reality is the due date's always it's always 11:59 Eastern Standard Time. Also, right, if something's going to be late, it's still very good to turn it in. Like this is not a class where you're like, yeah, screw it, that's too late. Like I would rather have people turn in late work for credit all the time. So thank you. That's a good question. All right, guys, I will see you later. Talk to you later. I'll be on next Thursday. Let me know if you need any help with this, but hope you're all doing well. Take care. All right, good night. Bye-bye.